So, good afternoon. Almighty God, we're meeting today to conduct matters of business. Please guide our hearts and minds in the spirit of fairness, right thought and speech. Impart your supreme wisdom upon our activities so that our affairs may reach a successful conclusion. Thank you for being our source of guidance today to the advancement and true welfare of our people and of Australia. Amen. We acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land and pay our respects to elders past and present. The Armidale Regional Community pays tribute to their love of land, love of people and love of culture. We all share the beauty of this land, the richness of its soil and the uniqueness of its wildlife. Let us walk together in the footsteps of love and understanding. While valuing diversity, let us share the same hope for a better future. Now, this meeting is being audio and video recorded, and the recordings of the non-confidential parts of the meeting will be made available on the internet. No other person are permitted to record the meeting unless specifically authorised by council to do so. All speakers are required to ensure that the comments are relevant to the particular agenda item, and the chairperson may withdraw the privilege to speak where a speaker makes personal remarks or criticism or makes abusive or inappropriate language. Speakers do not enjoy any special protection arising from comments made during council meetings and should therefore refrain from making defamatory remarks or personal defamatory statements against any individual. Could I ask you all to switch your phones to silent or off, please? Thank you. Right. We have one apology from Councillor Witters. So can I have a move and a second? Councillor Murat, Councillor Gray, all those in favour? Carried. Any disclosure and declaration of interest? Thank you, Councillor Tyler. I was going to announce that at the end of the... Thank you. And happy birthday to Councillor Robinson. There is a cake at the back for you.
Thank you very much.
I knew you were a nice person. You reflected, Jeremy.
Now, have your say. We only have one speaker, which is Steve McMillan. So, Steve, would you like to come up to the podium, please? Now, there's a button there to press to turn the mic. So, Steve, you have 5 minutes.
Okay, I'd like to address your notes about Sports Council. Just a bit of history, going back 3 or 4 years, when the administrator was here, we were given $65,000 to either try and get matching funding or to do special projects like the ones that we've recommended in your council notes today. I feel that with this, we have surety going forward. If we have to keep going back to council for every little thing, there may be between $3,000 and $15,000. I just think it's going to take a lot of time, and then if council does what it done to us recently and take away $250,000 from us in a couple of the projects that were set up, we're going to be fighting this all the time. To have the $65,000, as I said, will give us surety, will allow us to do the projects that we need to do. A lot of them are maintenance, like irrigation, like a toilet, like fencing, seating, fixing up things, particularly at places like Newling Oval that's in a bit of disrepair. These are the sort of things that we do, and to have it go whereby we have to keep applying back to council, I'd rather it see, as our record shows over the last 12 years that I've been chairman of it up until recently, that we are reliable, we're professional about it, and we go about it as a recommendation to council, and I haven't had anything knocked back since. So I just wanted to make you aware of all this and to ask you to have us keep the dollars at $65,000. And I mean, it will also help to advise and to help organisations bring events to Armidale that since 2006-2007 is estimated to have brought in $240 million. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. You all got a copy of the minutes from the Tinga meeting? Could I have a move and a seconder that those minutes are an accurate record of what was covered? Councillor Tiley, Councillor Martin. Any issues with them? Okay, I'll put that to vote. Those in favour? Carried. Now, councillors, we have one mayoral minute, which is a note, and a second mayoral minute, which is a decision. So, the first mayoral minute, which I put to you, is as specified that Council notes the formation of an external advisory group to provide advice to the Mayor to inform him on issues related to wood smoke and its impact on air quality in Armidale.
Mr Mayor, I have an amendment prepared in relation to that.
Yes, Councillor O'Connor?
Sorry?
Go ahead.
I have an amendment. It should be up on the screen.
You have to talk to it.
Sorry. Oh, yeah. Well, I'll talk to the amendment. The amendment I've sent down to the Executive Office, and it should be on the...
No, we didn't have time to get it all up for you. So you can speak to it. That's what I'm saying. You can speak to it.
All right. Well, the amendment is simply... Just bear with me for a moment. Sorry. Look, that basically the first paragraph would just change the sentence where it says that Council notes the formation of an external advisory group to provide advice to the Mayor, and what I'd like to do is add in, and all councillors, to inform them. I think you've just got to inform him, so it just would change the case there on the views of the advisory group on the issues related to wood smoke and its impact on air quality in Armidale and related health issues. So that, and then there are 3 points. So it would be so that, semicolon, the external advisory group complete its work and provide its advice in a written report to Council by the 20th of March 2019. Paragraph B would be that the external advisory group meet with any councillor and the CEO if they wish to make submissions or discuss this matter with the advisory group. And C, that the external advisory group meet with the Environmental Sustainability Committee in February 2019 to discuss this matter. I think my written one was a little bit better, but that's the gist of it. So I'd like to propose that.
Well, Councillor Connor, listening to that is substantially different for what I have. This is a totally external group with I have met with them. I have given them guidance as to what I hope to achieve, I hope they would achieve, and I have given them no real timeline. I've said before next winter, preferably, that's all. So what you're proposing is substantially different, so I
disagree with that, Mr Mayor. It's not substantially different, it's actually just to assist the process of the external advisory group.
This is not a point of discussion, this is my decision, this is my group that I'm putting
It's
forward.
your own group, Mr Mayor?
It is an advisory group to me, Councillor O'Connor.
So I'm proposing that the advisory group be inclusive and transparent so that it advise all councillors and that there be access of councillors to that advisory group on a limited basis and that there's some predictability in it, what it does.
Councillor O'Connor, that is why I decided not to have any councillors on it and no input from councillors. So let's...
excuse me, Mr Mayor, that is why you didn't articulate a reason as to why you don't want councillors involved?
This is a purely external advisory group. External advisory.
Well, the proposal that I've put does not remove the external nature of what it's doing. It simply allows councillors to make some submissions to it and gives it a time frame that everybody knows about.
I have given them a time frame. Councillor Tiley?
Could I suggest, Mr Mayor, you move your recommendation, so we've got a substantive motion, and then whether or not you regard this as an amendment or a separate motion, that's your call, of course. But I think if the move of the amendment removed that timeline, the intent is purely, and I'm seconding the amendment with that removal of the timeline. How about you move your motion?
Okay, I'll move my motion that as on the screen.
Yep. And with respect, Councillor O'Connor's moved an amendment with the addition of those things that she said, and which I've got a copy of here. And I'll second the amendment on the basis that we leave it open-ended in terms of time. And I'll speak to it in due course if you'd like. And my hope is that you could accept this because, well, I can't speak yet. Sorry, you're running the meeting.
Yeah.
Mr Mayor, can I ask that they pass a copy of that up to Jess so that we can actually see the amendments?
She's got it. Jess has got it. Councillor O'Connor, your point.
Oh. With respect, I'm quite happy to accept Councillor Tiley's foreshadowed support in due course. Yeah.
Councillor O'Connor, you make a statement to this?
Oh, yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, first of all, I'd like to congratulate you, Mr Mayor, in relation to putting together this external group. I've looked at the list that you've provided in your mayoral minute, and most of those people are known, I think, to most of us, and I don't think there would be any objection. I think that it's an excellent group of people, and I certainly applaud the idea that we do get an external group to actually deal with this issue, which has caused this council a degree of debate and some dissension in the past. So I think it's a really excellent initiative. What I wanted to do with this amendment is actually strengthen your initiative, Mr Mayor, by providing, well, some kind of a timeline, but I'm happy to leave that as a matter for yourself and the chair of that advisory group and the advisory group itself to determine. I'm really heartened to hear that you're talking about before next winter, because I think the issues are well known, and it would be great to have something in place before next winter. I think it's important to note that the application for smart cities was not successful, and so we're now sort of back to tabula rasa at the beginning of 2018, this year, in relation to what are we going to do about this debate in the community with respect to wood smoke. I think that it's excellent to have an external committee. I don't have any issue with that, but I think that it would be great to formalise and it would give councillors a lot of, I think, support or a lot of comfort to know that there's a place for them to actually just meet with the advisory group once probably and just put their point of view. We know the points of view are various, and I think they're all really valid, and I think this would give councillors a lot of comfort that they could do that. We are the governing body. I acknowledge your position, Mr Mayor, but as a whole we need to work together, and that's why I don't think there should be or can be really any issue with them sort of responding as a form of advice to the whole of council and yourself, of course. I think it's also part C, which could now become part B, is important if we delete. Oh, sorry, I withdraw that. Part C is very important. We've got a really hard-working environmental sustainability committee, which does a priori deal with this issue of air pollution and the relationship with state government. It's been doing it for a long time, and there's a lot of knowledge there. And I think it would also give them comfort and some sense of respect for their role that they meet. And I understand there is a scheduled meeting of that committee in February 2019, so that would provide a really excellent opportunity for them to just talk with the external committee, and really the two should be able to be of great assistance to each other. One's an internal, one's an external. There's no dramas about that. There's some overlap, in fact. So I think it would provide a really sound basis for going forward if this amendment was adopted by Council today.
Councillor Tiley. Councillor Khanna, you turn your mic off, please.
Mr Mayor, firstly, I initially read the mayoral minute and I thought the mayor is excluding the councillors, and I know deep down that's not the case, but that's how it reads it, because you're seeking information for yourself personally. I don't believe that the motion and the amendment are mutually exclusive. I think, having thought about it a bit more, it's great to get an expert external group to give this council advice on what we all know is a very difficult issue. The amendment seeks to bring in more transparency, more inclusiveness, a sharing of the knowledge with the elected body, and not just for you. I know there'll be a report come to the council in due course, but we know from the debates we've had in here in the last 15 months that there's divergent views, that there's that there's an environmental committee which has a terms of reference, which makes it perfectly legitimate for it to consider this sort of thing. So for that committee to meet with the expert group, probably only once, convey their views, it's a good thing to do, because we're going to flesh out the issues and perhaps find some new pathways forward. And likewise, and also, I believe that the public would want us to work together as a group of 11 councillors to come to a better outcome in terms of this vexed issue over time. So I just think that the amendment isn't mutually exclusive to the motion. It gives the councillors that want to have a say in front of this group that opportunity. It gives our committee that opportunity, and it hopefully will make for a more rounded, acceptable set of outcomes for us to consider in due course. So I would appeal to you, Mr Mayor, to accept the amendment in the interests of transparency and inclusiveness. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tiley. Just to provide clarification, they do not have any terms of reference from me. They do not have as I mentioned before, they do not have a timeline that's definitive from me. There's purely an external group that we cannot dictate as council what they come up with. So it's purely an external. So one that, no, we're not forming it. This is purely, I've asked those people. The council has not had a part to play as far as forming it. So can I clarify two things? Down the bottom is a Professor Hine. He's been asked to join. We haven't heard back whether he has accepted yet.
Can I ask you a question, Mr Mayor? Did you ask these people to form this group as our leader?
I did.
You did? Well, that's council. You're our leader. You're the council.
I asked them, but the staff have not been, we don't have staff involved. And the other point to note is that John Grills from the Barbecues Galore has joined the committee, so it's a broad spectrum. So anyone who wishes to speak against the amendment?
Not necessarily against. I think I'm foreshadowing an amendment to the amendment. If I can just, particularly to Part B, that councillors may provide submissions in writing to the advisory group, at which the advisory group can invite councillors to further discuss submissions as deemed relevant by the advisory group, something like that. So, or with Part D, that the Environmental Sustainability Committee could be the spokesperson for these submissions by councillors as well, just to make sure that there's an avenue for the advisory group to receive any thoughts without or information that is deemed relevant, so that they're considering all matters or all sides of the debate. So that councillors may provide submissions in writing to the advisory group, at which the advisory group can invite councillors to further discuss submissions as deemed relevant by the advisory group. That's fine. That was just a thought, an added thought. Sorry.
I'm uncomfortable with that in the sense that it just sort of layers in a lot more formality. Somebody's got to, work to put something in writing, whereas I was anticipating it would just be a simple meeting, maybe with something in writing, maybe not. It sort of formalises it beyond what I was anticipating. You wouldn't be inclined to accept the spirit in which I put the amendment. That is that I wanted to minimise formality and burdening the external advisory group, just to give some guidance that if councillors want to meet with them and have a chat about their feelings or views about it, that they can.
Councillor O'Connor, you turn your mic off, please. Now, do you not accept the amendment? The foreshadow amendment? So, Councillor O'Connor?
All right.
Okay, so we have got... Councillor O'Connor, you turn your mic off, please. Do we have a person speaking against the total amendment? If not, I'll put that. This is on the amendment because there's been a mover and a second, but there's no one speaking against. Sorry, I'm not adding to the motion. So I'm putting it to the vote of as is, the amendment. Those in favour of the amendment? Those against? So the amendment is there. So the amendment has become the motion. So I'll put the motion. Those in favour of the motion? Those against? And the motion is carried. In your supplementary agenda is item 7.2, which is, and I'll move that Council requests the CEO to undertake a review of the current committee structure, including the terms of number of committees, composition and terms of reference. Now, we'll like to include, if you can, the sports committee at the bottom of that background. So can I have a mover? Sorry, I moved that. So, anyone wish to speak?
A question, please.
Yeah?
There's no reasoning behind the motion. I'm wondering what your reason is.
Okay, the reason is that I've noticed a couple of committees been having very similar roles, and quite a number of members of the committees are the same. And I think it's a good time for us, after a year, to look at the committees, have a real close look, see which ones are now relevant to our needs, and which members on those committees are relevant to those respective committees. That is the upshot of it. So I've moved it. Anyone wish to speak against? Councillor Tiley?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I would submit that we've only been going 15 months and that some committees have been slow in starting, such as the Wellbeing Advisory Committee, such as the Floodplain Committee, but we're going to get there. When I first came here in June of 2016, I totally revamped the committees, the committee structure. Then in May 2017, Mr Woodland will well remember, we had a further revamp of the committee structure. And at that time, the staff wanted to substantially reduce the number of committees. I went along with them part of the way, but the upshot was that these committees survived that cut, if you like, for good reason. They're all important committees to give advice to this council. We endorsed these committees in Guyra in October last year. So we've had 3 chops at this since June 2016, and now to suggest that we need a further chop when there's only 22 months left in the life of this council, I don't think is going to serve any good purpose. Let's take the case in point of the Sports Council, working really well, making some great decisions, keeping basic parish pump sporting issues away from this council. Why disturb them? It doesn't make a lot of sense to me, and I just think that we've got far more important issues to consider. I know that staff over time are sometimes disquiet about the fact that they've got a lot of committees to service, but I think that's the price you pay in a democracy, and I would urge that we let the committees run their course. The proper time to review all committees is in October 2020. Thank you.
Anyone want to speak for the motion?
Just like to ask a question. Is the reason that it is too much of a workload, is that the problem? Is it a workload issue or?
No, it's not a workload. It's more that there's the Business Advisory Committee and the Regional Growth Advisory Committee. When you really look at a very similar sort of roles, who's got, look, is the Regional Growth Advisory Committee deals with businesses, so does the Business Advisory Committee. So those two I see as a lot of overlap. Councillor Gray?
Dr Mayor, I'd like to speak for the motion. As you've explained, that there are some committees that have been going for over the 12-month period and are deemed that there could be improvements made. This review, I believe, is not going to change the majority of what's happening with the committees, but it is an opportunity to review how they are functioning, the strengths of them, some of the challenges they may be facing, and we can find out if there is any way that we can take action that would improve sooner rather than waiting till September 2020. If we can make improvements now, then let's do it. It makes sense. We're always on a continuous improvement journey. This is an opportunity to do that. It is a review only, and where it's deemed that changes will make things smoother or more efficient, then we have a choice whether we go forward with that or not.
A speaker against, Councillor Robson?
Well, I'm not speaking against. What I'd like to do is ask the CEO what she thinks of this proposal and how much additional work it would involve for council.
Yeah, through you, CEO. Councillor O'Connor, you turn your mic off, please.
can I say that this has not been motivated by any staff complaints about the servicing of the committees? That's a role that we undertake, and we understand that it is part of our role to do so. To undertake the review, obviously the final decision about the numbers and the membership of committees will come back to council for its consideration and approval. I don't, given the previous reviews as outlined by Councillor Tiley, I don't anticipate that this will be an extensive exercise, but it is I think, primarily focused on ensuring that the terms of reference for each of the committees are sufficiently specific and non-overlapping, and to, I think, ensure that the calendar of meetings of the various committees are at manageable and non-competing times.
Councillor O'Connor, you will speak against it?
O'Connor. Yes, I do, unless somebody else has a view. Well, I would like to support what Councillor Tiley said. It's a bit concerning. It's a very new council, and it's taken a long time to get these committees up. There's been a lot of thought about it. And we're not just dealing with putting into, a question mark around our role, the 11 of us here, but also all of the community members who've settled into roles on the various committees. And it's a huge amount of work actually gaining the trust and getting people sort of into gear to do the work. So all the chairs have been working really hard. I do agree with what Councillor Gray said. We are all on a continuous improvement journey, and that's something that we do as a matter of course anyway, with the assistance from the CEO and the staff. I mean, I've got a meeting booked in to talk with the CEO about my committee, the committee that I chair, and that's, that's just not business as usual. And I think it's going to be really disturbing, not just for us, but also for all the voluntary community members on our committees to suddenly think, well, we're all being reviewed. It's a traumatic thing, and it's only going to sort of add delay and uncertainty, I think. I have no problem with issues of overlap or uncertainty or any of those things to be dealt with on an ad hoc basis. And if there is a real problem, we'll bring it back next year and we can look at it again. But we've had no workshop on this. There's some mayoral minute came at 11:55 or something this morning, so there's not even been the opportunity for us to actually discuss amongst ourselves how we're feeling. So I would oppose the mayoral minute on the basis that it's not been enough notice. It's very disruptive, and we can do the continuous improvement as we go along in any case.
Mr. Mayor?
Councillor Bailey?
As the chair of the largest committee, I think I've got, I have to kind of take over the town hall to fit all my committee in. I think the committee's too unwieldy, it's too large, and I think it would be far more functional if it was smaller. And I also think that I inherited a lot of people onto the committee who have had long service with Armidale Jumeric, and I think there's probably a need to add some fresh blood, to put it bluntly, and that's why I can only speak for the Regional Growth Committee, but I think it is time that we did look at the size of it and we did look at the composition of it. The terms of reference I'm very apprehensive about, but as long as I can have a fair input into the terms of reference, as all the councillors can, I'd be prepared to look at that. But, we've got to be careful that we make the committees relevant, and there are a lot of challenges in dealing with council committees and resourcing. But I think the size of the committee and the makeup are fairly important. The terms of reference is fairly open-ended, but there's a lot of expertise, but also I think there's a lot of people out there that would welcome an opportunity to serve on the Regional Growth Committee who aren't there at the moment.
Anyone else speak against? So I'll put that. Those in favour of the motion? Those against? The motion's carried. Thank you. Now, moving on to item 8.1, the rural property addressing in 3 parts. Can I move it? Councillor Martin, Councillor Murat, Councillor Martin.
Oh, yeah, thank you. I actually raised this issue originally following a discussion with a member from the Rural Fire Service who was attending a fire up near Black Mountain and couldn't find the property because there was no good signage, and thought that it would be something that would be helpful to all our rural ratepayers if we had signs for properties displaying either a property or house number that would be easily seen by anyone that was travelling along the road. Sadly, Walker Council installed signs similar to what we're looking at after the loss of a life on a property because the emergency services were unable to locate the property in time to get there. And we don't want to see that happening in our region. So that's what originally started me on this. It was to help particularly emergency services, but anyone else that's travelling along roads to find a property if that's what they're looking for. The only issue that I had with it, we didn't want to burden the rural ratepayers with extra costs at present because obviously things are fairly struggling on the land. So I'd definitely like to see the possibility of grants or state or federal government funding to be explored as a starting point on this.
Councillor Murat.
I'd just like to say I fully support Councillor Martin on this issue.
Speaker 4. Councillor O'Connor.
Yes, I'd just like to say I'm really thrilled that Councillor Martin has brought this notice of motion because being a rural resident and travelling a lot on the Waterfall Way where you can see these beautiful blue and white rural property signs that Walker Council's installed, I think at the property owner's expense, $287 is a very small fee when for a landholder when you consider what's at stake if their addressing is confused. And I have dealt with some addressing issues in the previous councils or the previous council, Armidale Dumaric, and it's absolutely a matter of life and death. So I would absolutely really support this, that we give the opportunity for rural residents to, I actually think it's important in town as well, but that's a different matter. It can be a life and death matter, so I absolutely endorse Councillor Martin's notice of motion because it will speed up the ability that rural residents have to make their farms safe. And, well, that's important in 2 ways. 1, to protect their families, but 2, to help them comply with what's now a very, very complicated and detailed, onerous work health safety responsibility. So I support it. Thank you.
Anyone want to speak against the motion? Okay, I'll put the vote. Those in favour? Unanimous. Thank you. Item 8.2. The cost shifting from state. The council notes the information in 4 parts. So can I have a mover, please? Councillor Robinson, Councillor O'Brien. Councillor Robinson?
Yeah, I'd like actually to have another slight part to it and that's after the 4 parts, that council supports local government New South Wales efforts to put an end to cost shifting and calls on all political parties to do likewise.
Repeat the last part, please.
And calls upon all political parties to do likewise.
So, Councillor O'Brien, you happy with that amendment? So, Councillor Robinson?
Mr Mayor, could I suggest that instead of notes, supports? Notes is about as exciting as watching paint dry. I think we've got to be a bit stronger than notes. I think.
Hang on, Councillor Brayley. Yes, that's up to the mover of the motion. So,
add just a minor amendment, if I may.
Councillor Tyler.
On that part E, which I can hardly read, calls upon political parties to do likewise, comma, in particular, that the Commonwealth Grants Commission methodology for determining grants be reviewed to take account of disability factors and other changes since the existing methodology was determined. No, that's what the Grants Commission does. That's implied. No, I think that's all we need. And I can speak to that if the mover's happy.
Yep. Is the movers and seconders happy?
Yeah. I'm happy, provided...
Councillor Tiley, your mic, please.
Sorry.
Provided Councillor Tiley tells me when the last time the methodology was updated.
If I can perhaps speak to the amendment and get it, and then I'm done. Is that all right? Okay. The personal income tax, PITS it was called, was introduced by Malcolm Fraser in 1976 and carried on by succeeding governments ever since then. 2% of personal income tax collections back then sounded good, but of course the tax pile was a lot smaller than it is today. The Commonwealth Grants Commission was founded at that time specifically to determine income equalisation and disability factors across the nation for the then 650 odd local governments. The Commonwealth, as we know, has 80% of the taxing powers, and the states and local government the remaining 20% between them. This is a really critical issue, has been for a very long time because of our need to get greater resourcing. The Grants Commission review is supposed to occur every 5 years. To my knowledge, it hasn't been reviewed in the last 10 years. In other councils where I've been, we put the case on occasions for various disability factors, remoteness, length of gravel roads, all those sorts of things, flooding, you name it. So I think this motion would be strengthened if we made something very specific as a motion in terms of the revenue raising side. In relation to the cost shifting side, this has been around for a very long time. My master's dissertation in 2003...
Councillor Tiley, really this should be Councillor Robinson. She's the one that moved the issue about cost shifting. So,
yeah, will you let me go?
I'll let you go on the amendment, not on the motion.
I'm speaking to the amendment, which the council has...
I know, the amendment was the...
One more sentence and I'll shut up. The final sentence is this. 15 years ago, my dissertation was on cost shifting and unfunded mandates on local government. And so this has been around for a very long time, and it's been the mantra of the Local Government Association before the Shires Association. So it's not new. This motion needs to suggest something tangible. That's why I added the last bit, and thank you for your forbearance.
And your microphone, please. Councillor Robinson, your motion.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, no, well, as I said, as long as I knew more about what Councillor Tiley was talking about, I was quite happy to support it. And the reason that this is important, and the reason I put it forward to Council, was that local governments really are best positioned to make decisions in the interests of local communities. And that includes the needs for infrastructure and services. And as I pointed out in the background information, our ability to make the best possible decisions is increasingly being affected by financial constraints. As we all know, anybody from our experience with the difficult budgets we've had with this council, and we have effectively a triple whammy of rate capping, cost shifting, and reduced financial assistance grants. And as Council has pointed out by his urging for revised methodology, we have had a fall from 1% of tax revenue to 0.55% of tax revenue from the federal government. That's an almost halving of their contribution. And the same thing, we've seen cost shifting from the state government. which is now costing New South Wales local councils $820 million a year. And there are big ticket cost shift items such as pension rate rebates, the proportion of which has fallen for councils having to pay an increasing proportion of those, and various other things which I've actually mentioned in the report. And one particular important item that we should look at is the reduction in library funding. And I looked it up on the internet and found out that New South Wales libraries are visited 34.8 million times a year. And it's just interesting to compare those number of visits with the number of visits to the stadia for the combined Sydney Cricket Ground, Alliance and the NZ stadiums, which are visited 3.1 million times a year. So the libraries are getting 10 times as many visits as a stadia, but only 1%, 1/100th of the assistance from the state government. So that just shows you how inequitable the treatment of local government is at the moment. And it's really worth quoting LG New South Wales on this, where they say it's common for government to make a big splash about one-off funding for local infrastructure, but then council has to absorb the cost of maintaining that infrastructure for years to come. And that really simply isn't fair. It's squeezing councils at both ends of the stick. And we know that's true for Armidale Regional Council because we had a big debate about the Guyra Main Street and having to defer the work because of the tanks that we found are hidden in there. That was completely and utterly the responsibility of the state government pollution control, and yet we are having to pay for their mistakes. So I'm hoping that council, the entire council, will support what we're saying up here and support the efforts of local government New South Wales to put an end to cost shifting, and also call on all political parties to do the same. Thank you.
Councillor O'Brien.
As Councillor Tiley said, this issue has been going on for a very long time, but it is actually getting worse. Every year, Local Government New South Wales does a survey to measure the extent to which local government carry the burden of the state and federal costs, and it is now between 6 and 17% of local council budgets, and it's worse in regional areas. Now, local New South Wales councils from all over New South Wales are all asking for this cost shifting to stop. I think the pressure's being put on now because there's elections coming up next year, so it's really important now that not only that we do something different, but we actually join in our fellow councillors all over New South Wales to put the pressure on. The difference between the 6% and 17% difference to our budgets is, the difference between whether we're in the red or the black. And listening to how the local area, like even the man speaking tonight, talking about money taken from their committees, the kind of local areas are being robbed really to foot the bill of New South Wales government and federal governments too. It's our duty to give our local residents the best services within our means, and it's really not fair to ask them to suck it up, to have worse services, worse roads, to pay higher rates or all the other things that we're asking them to do in order for the New South Wales government to have a surplus that they can spend on stadiums. Many of the councils too that were not fit for the future may not have been fit for the future on the basis of cost shifting. And many are asking who's to blame for forced amalgamations. The fact is that we should join other New South Wales councils to support the local government New South Wales demand to properly fund councils and all the work we do. Let's not let our local communities be ripped off. Our job is not to suck up what's dished out to us, but to fight for a better deal and a fairer deal for local government. So I think we should join with all our fellow New South Wales councillors and demand the state and federal governments stop cost shifting. Thank you.
Councillor O'Brien.
No.
A speaker for the motion?
A question, please.
Yep.
Could Councillor Robinson consider putting a stronger word in the notes? Notes is a bit like a wet fish.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy with, say, endorses or even supports, though, I mean, I think it's difficult. Endorses is fine, yep. And can I also make a correction that the notes is that council endorses the information, which is A to D, and then E is actually a separate clause which goes, so it's, yeah, so basically like that, because it's part 1 and part 2 effectively. Yeah, that makes a lot more sense. Thank you.
Okay, speaker for the motion? Councillor O'Connor?
Yes, I'm particularly delighted to see Councillor Tiley's amendment go up there, because I think if the matter is one of federal and state grants commissions actually addressing this, and I just want to note, perhaps for the sake of the webcast as much as anything, that when the independent panel was asked to look at reforms in local government many years ago, which ended up being dominated by this sort of merger agenda, there was a cry from the then local government New South Wales and from the local government community in New South Wales to actually include cost shifting in the terms of reference of that inquiry, and it was like a sort of fantasy world, really. The state government absolutely ignored that request, and the entire inquiry, to my recollection, was conducted on the basis of there being no cost shifting, this imaginary world from the state government's point of view, who of course were responsible for the terms of reference, that there was no problem called cost shifting. But as I recall, local government New South Wales at that time actually could show that that time it was about 500 million cost shifting to the sector, and that was about the exact equal amount that the sector was missing in terms of essential funding. So it's an absolutely critical issue, and I think the state government has basically been pulling a Swifty over the local government sector in New South Wales, at least, for a long time, and we need not only this motion, but continual support for local government New South Wales campaign and continual pressure on, particularly on those grants commissions, to recognise what's basically, you know, a sort of open, broad daylight financial mugging of the local government sector. Thanks.
A speaker against the motion? Okay, I'll put that to the vote. Those in favour? Carried. Item 8.3 has been withdrawn. So move to item 9.1. And acquisition of drainage reserve, and it's in 4 parts as described. Could I have a mover? Councillor Robertson, Councillor Murat, Councillor Robinson.
Well, this effectively was an anomaly. I can't say the word, but anyway, it was an oddity, an anomaly that needs to be fixed, and I'm very happy to move that it's be fixed.
Councillor Murat.
I just support the motion, thank you.
Any speakers for? Okay, any against? I'll put that then. Those in favour? Carried. Now, I'd like to, I know you're going to be hard with your iPads, but items 9.2, all the information ones, I'd like to treat them in globo, unless there's one that people wish to take out.
I'd like to speak to 9.2, please.
Okay, well, we'll treat the information ones later then. Okay, 9.2, I can have a It is a presentation annual report. Can I have a move and a second of them, please, Councillor
I
Tiley?
move that Council endorse, in deference to Councillor Bailey, endorse the annual report 2017-18. I have a couple of matters to raise, if I can get a seconder.
Yeah, if you've got a second, Councillor Gray.
Thank you. Firstly, I'd like to congratulate the staff involved in their work in putting together the 2017-18 report. There's a matter that sticks out which goes to cost shifting, and it's rates and charges written off. And this is a question for you on notice. I know you can't answer it today, Madam CEO. The mandatory pension rebate, 693,000, but the government gives us considerably less than that, and each year the difference between the two grows and grows. I'd like to know, just for interest, how that's growing, if you don't mind. I'm sure we all would like to know that, because it's an impost on us. The other matter is to do with contracts. In 2016-17, as administrator, when the law changed, we increased the quantum of contracts that could be approved under delegated authority to 500,000. But page 43 of this annual report indicates contracts that were awarded over 150,000. I submit that that's not necessary, that instead of all those in the list, there should only be one, the Timber Bridge upgrade. And I think we probably should change that. Page 43, bottom half. The resolution to go to 500,000 was back in Peter Dennis's time. So it wouldn't apply to this fiscal year, under review. But anyway, I mentioned that if it needs to be changed, Mr Mayor, the staff can do that, and we adopt it subject to that perhaps. Okay?
Councillor Tiley, turn your mic off, please, CEO.
Thank you, Dr Mayor. I've just been advised that the legal requirement, the statutory requirement, is that we declare and put in our annual report all contracts over 150,000, irrespective of the delegations that being exercised.
It's in relation to the GIPA legislation, and that all contracts over 150,000 need to be. It's a GIPA requirement. Yeah, not a yeah.
Councillor Gray.
I just want to congratulate everybody involved to make this report as concise and precise as it is. It's a job well done. Thank you.
A speaker for? Against? Okay, I'll put that. Those in favour? Carried. 11.1, which is the security screening for Armidale Regional Airport. That we adopt the exemption to tender as per what's written. Can I move it, Councillor Morat? Councillor Gray, Councillor Morat.
I think it's just quite clear that the complexity of the security screening at the airport requires the matter to be dealt with by the senior staff, so I'm quite happy to move that motion.
Councillor Gray?
Ditto.
Any speaker for?
Just a question relating to the financial aspects. It's $1.855 million. Are we outlaying that initially and getting some reimbursement, or how's that going to work, I wonder?
Madam CEO, can you clarify that?
Phil Perriman.
Thanks, Dr Mayor. In relation to that, there are two components in the grant, $855,000 for equipment, $1 million for infrastructure variations and adjustments there. The grant closes on the 22nd of March next year. At the moment, under discussions, it would appear as if the grant will be provided at the same time as the approval for the equipment and infrastructure adjustments, but that is not yet confirmed.
There's a really important time constraint, isn't there? This has got to be done by March.
22nd of March, but they have slid the compliance requirement for security screening at the airport out until the end of 2020, as opposed to the end of 2019.
So the council's contribution will be cash
At this time, we're not sure. That's one of the reasons we want to be able to get to the 5 providers that have been authorised by the Department of Home Affairs, so that we can come back to council if there is any gap. Home Affairs are saying there shouldn't be a gap. We're not sure of that on the numbers that we're getting at the moment. That's correct.
Now, it's speaker for the motion.
I just wanted to ask a question. Can I ask that question, Mr. Mayor? It's in relation to section 55, subsection 3. That I think is the section we're making this decision on as an extenuating. I just want confirmation that we're relying on extenuating circumstances, which are those described in this report. Is that the basis that we're actually relying on this subsection?
Councillor O'Connor, you're on microphone. And Councillor Robertson.
Yeah, no, I wanted to ask a question. I wanted to ask a question as well.
Yep, we'll deal one at a time. Our CEO?
The short answer is yes. Yes, again.
Councillor Robertson, you wish to speak for the motion, or you
no,
want
I
a
want
question?
to ask a question as well, which is, what is going to happen about the aircraft with less than 40 passengers? Are we going to require screening or not?
Through you, CEO.
Again, I might ask the service leader to give you an update, but it is a subject of discussion with the operators.
That's quite correct. It is a subject of discussion, or will be a subject of discussion with the operators. Tamworth, for example, has adopted the approach that it is a screened airport. Every passenger that goes through that airport are screened. The same with Coffs Harbour, the same with Port Macquarie and Bella and Byron. So that the standard being adopted is all passengers leaving a regional screened airport are screened. That will be my recommendation to council once we've got all the numbers together. One of the reasons is also that it does not therefore create a cost differential between two carriers just dependent upon the plane size that they're using.
But we will have chance to discuss that again later.
The plan is to come back to you after we get the numbers back in March, probably hopefully April next year, with the whole proposal, so that way we can put it all to you as a proposition of this is the impact of the screening, this is the impact on the models that we would offer to you.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, I'll put that to the vote. Those in favour? Carried unanimously. Item 10, there's nothing. Now this is where, hang on. Yes. So, yeah, I'd like to treat items 13.1 to 13.4 and items 16.2 and 16.3 in Globo. So they're all for information.
I'd like to speak to 13.2, the operational plan, thanks, and 16, what did you say, 16.2 and 3. Yep. I don't know why we need to do this, Mayor. We've only been going for an hour. We've got very little to go.
So,
anyway.
Any mover and seconder for in Globo for those items except for item 13.2? Councillor Murat, Councillor Gray. Those in favour? Sorry, can you have hands up, please? Those in favour of going in Globo? 6. Carried. So, item 13.2, the operational plan.
Mr. Mayor, I believe this is not a matter we can skim over and just adopting Globo. It's the first quarterly review of our operational plan, and it behoves us as councillors.
Sorry, Councillor Tiley, well, you need a mover and a seconder first.
Sorry, I've moved it.
You're moved, I guess, but need a seconder.
Sorry.
Councillor O'Connor. Councillor Tiley.
Okay. as I was saying, it behoves us as councillors to read and to digest how we're performing through the year. So I've got two questions I'd like to put to the CEO, and they're very broad, Madam CEO. What's your view or perspective as to our current performance against the operational plan thus far in the financial year? And do you anticipate that all of our 18-19 projects will be completed as planned and as provided for in that op plan? So I know it's a tough question, it's early in the year, but just a broad overview would be great. Thank you.
CEO?
Thank you. There's probably a short and long answer to this as well, but I'll try and give you the short version. I would think if we were grading ourselves on a scale of 1 to 10, we'd be sitting around a 7, and the commentary from the teacher would probably be saying not too bad under the circumstances. It is early in the operating plan year, and we have strived to present a report to council that gives as good a snapshot of how we're travelling as we possibly can. You'll appreciate if we'd reported on every single action in the operational plan, it'll be a lot chunkier than this. Renata Davies, who's prepared this report, has done a very good job of crystallising the key actions and priorities from across the organisation. So, short answer, 7 out of 10, not bad during the circumstances. I suspect as we get closer to the end of the financial year, we will start identifying those projects, those critical actions that are going to suffer a little from some of the budget retractions, and we may need to come back to council for in our quarterly review to ease some of that up, or for the council to note that some of the things won't be done.
That's a title, yeah, Mike's not on.
I'm trying to put it on here. Okay, I'm punching it. The second part was about the Capital Works program, and it's terrific to see the tenders for Platform Road and Kempsey Road up today. What's your sense about our capacity to expend the capital budget? And I'm particularly interested in the Timber Bridges program. Maybe perhaps Mr. Pukowski might have something to say on that.
Dr. Mayor, if I can give a preliminary answer, but we do have Mark Burgess, who is our acting service lead in the area, who will be able to give a more specific response about the Timber Bridges. Well, you can have it on record now, which I guess is the intention, to do that. Mark can give you a response to that. As to the capital program overall, as you're aware, we've had to bring it within capacity and within our financial means. The actual budget that we have moved it from around 66 million back to around 42 million. It will be a close run thing to complete all of the projects on time by the end of June. But we have, I think, much better processes in place now than perhaps previously to be able to monitor and understand where we are with those projects, and if there are going to be delays, deferrals or cancellations, we would obviously need to come back to council about those.
We're a council, it's fair to say, Madam CEO, we're a bit like Daniel Andrews. We're here to get things done. And that's certainly my view, and I think that's shared around the table, but I realise the constraints. I'd be interested to hear the latest on Timber Bridges, if you may.
Certainly, if I could ask Mark Burgess, but just to respond, Councillor Tony, we're here to get things done too.
I know that we spoke about it yesterday, and I think the way that we're now structured as a roads maintenance department has resulted in my team providing services to the capital management section, who are essentially overseeing and managing the Timber Bridge programme. From my side of the fence and the work that we're doing, we're actively working through the programme works and assisting Leah and her team in delivering those bridges. We've made excellent progress on works at Station Creek, Maiden Creek, and we're in the process of finishing works on Boundary Creek too. In regards to the Forward programme, as a service provider assisting in the delivery of those projects, I need to just refer to Leah, who'll be able to talk more on that.
So the Bridges program is working well. We've run through 7 of the 30 odd bridges in the roads management strategy. What we're currently looking at is opportunities to expand our funding base in order to knock over more bridges in the next bridge renewal program rounds. So we're looking at trying to do, yes, to try and work through, but basically the program was set out within the roads management strategy, and we're working through the first 7 of that until we meet our capacity. At the moment, we've got engagement to source treatment options around the next lot of bridges within that program. So that will be our approach for the Forward Works program, is to try and maximise co-contributions and work through those 31. I think it's 31 bridges. Mm. Yes, so we're trying that one again to see if we can span the program. Yep, absolutely.
So, Councillor O'Connor.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I don't have much to add other than that I'm appreciative of the information supplied and looking very much forward to the next quarterly report in early 2019. I think councillors have a close and perhaps next year an even closer interest in these reports. Thank you.
Councillor O'Connor, you're on mic, please. Speaker for? Speaker against? I'll put it. Those in favour? Carried. $16.1.
I wanted to raise 13.4 also, but I was focusing on 13.2 and I missed the boat. It's been important. It's our monthly financial report. We've just let it go through to the keeper.
Sorry, the decision's made, Councillor Tiley. Yes, that, yeah. You put your point, please, Councillor Barley.
I think it's an important issue. He's raised an important issue, and I think we, under due diligence, should be looking at these things. And he's been good enough to admit that age and weariness, maybe he didn't pick it up in the first round, and and as a consequence, I think it's worth reflecting. And so I would encourage that we suspend standing orders to land to speak on.
And there was a second, Councillor Conn. Okay, put that. The people want to move into suspend standing orders. Those show their hands. Carried. Okay.
Thank you, councillors. The essence of the report is that our deficit is down from 3.5 million to 785,000. And I'm wondering at this stage, a question to the CEO, I guess, what actions at this stage have you in motion to find that 785 so that we at least have a line ball situation at 30th of June 2019? And will council be consulted in that process?
Thank you for your question, Councillor. At this stage, we are still projecting a $785,000 deficit as at the end of June. We haven't achieved that yet, and the strategies we are employing to eliminate the original adopted 3.5 million deficit revolve around significant reductions in expenditure, primarily around increasing or scrutinising the vacancy factor that we're holding in the organisation at any one time, reductions in budget around consultants and materials, as well as discretionary spend. It will take all of the discipline of the organisation to be able to achieve even just that $785,000 deficit. We are continuing to pursue strategies to get to the line ball situation, as you indicate. It will be even more rigour around the recruitment of staff, the filling of vacancies, the further reductions in the discretionary spend around consultancies. We've pulled back things like training for ourselves as the administration, seminars, conferences. It's just the usual housekeeping and reductions in expenditure. There have been some accounting adjustments, which unfortunately our CFO isn't here to explain in detail, but there were some accounting adjustments which did assist in getting us to the $785,000.
The report on pages 26 and 27 and 28, but the main one, of course, is General Fund on page 26. It deals with our situation in cash terms, as distinct from total expenses, total income, surplus or deficit, and I struggle with that because of the relevance of the fact that you collect a lot of your income, for example, rates, at one time of the year, and then you gradually spend it through the year. But looking at these pages and thinking about the $785,000 deficit, there's, on the tracking column you'll see other revenues were only 30%, we've got a 30% budget variance, and there's two items there that have given us the cause for that. One's car parking enforcement income. We've talked about that recently. We're missing out big time on income there. I'm just wondering how quickly we can plug that hole. That's my first question on that matter. Have you any foreshadowed period when we can be back on track with car parking collections?
If I may, Dr. Mayor, I can refer some of the detail of that to the Director of Corporate and Transformation around the car parking revenue. But, Councillor, we have begun, or we have doubled our efforts, and I don't mean literally doubled our efforts, in enforcement of parking, including at the airport, albeit we are using fairly mechanical and manual means to do so. The property divestments are occurring. We've had recent sales in Guyra. We're optimistic, and there's a report in this council meeting around the aged care facility and the divestment of that. I think there will be, well, we are optimistic about being able to realise a sizable cash contribution to our position.
The matter of the industrial subdivision at the airport, the 44-lot subdivision, you've included in income some sales of those lots. It's now only 6 months to the end of the financial year. We don't yet have a grant announcement. What will be the trigger for getting deposits from sales off the plan to help us achieve the budget target?
And it is a matter that has been under review for a number of months. The biggest trigger is getting the state government grant, so that we can move with some confidence about actually proceeding with that subdivision. There have been contracts exchanged, but getting cash in is dependent upon the servicing and being confident about getting the servicing to that subdivision.
Be at least somewhat happy that the local member told me recently it's very close. So let's hope that's correct. So thank you for your forbearance. My hope is that we can rejig this particular report to make it more meaningful, especially for my colleagues, because I struggle with some of it, I don't mind telling you. Thank you for that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, no.
Councillor Watson?
Yeah, I just want, while we've suspended standing orders and talking about this, and I will say that I had a long discussion with our Chief Financial Officer the other day and made some suggestions about how we could actually make it more intelligible for the average councillor and even people like me who've experienced in mathematics and statistics. And like Councillor Tiley, I'm very happy to see improvements in efficiency, but I would be very, very disappointed to see cuts that result in our inability to meet our commitments in the operational plan. And I've certainly heard about a few of those today. And the real reason I would be very disappointed in that is that the big ticket item that means that takes us from a very, very comfortable surplus to a deficit is depreciation. And from my point of view, while we do need to maintain all our assets, especially sort of buildings that last 100 years, it doesn't matter one hoot whether we actually complete repairs and maintenance by the end of June or we do it in July in a different budget year. And I would hope that we will be able to have the improvements in efficiency carry on for the term of this council. And even if we have a small deficit, which is entirely, instead of a big surplus, which we would have if we didn't have the depreciation, that we would be able to be flexible enough to not cut important services, because those services and those things listed in our operational plan are vitally important, and I really don't want to see them cut.
CEO?
Dr. Mayor, can I assure the Council at this stage there have been no reductions in core services that we are providing. The reductions in expenditure have been around discretionary income. It's probably not appropriate for me, who struggled through her accountancy 101 when she was doing her law degree, to enter into a discussion about depreciation. I'll leave that to our CFO on another day.
Councillor Bailey?
A question to the CEO and also us. The developer of the land opposite the airport now has signage up for sale of his land. Are there any plans for similar signage to go up on our side of the road to show that we are actively out there looking to sell land? That's the first point. And I think it's, secondly, are we moving to an expression of interest for real estate agents to put forward an expression of interest to market the land at the business park?
Through you, Dr. Mayor, and I think our Director of Operations will probably have some contribution to this discussion as well. There has been, I guess, a reluctance to move into full body marketing of the land until we have some certainty around the grant from the state government. Every time I meet with our local member, he tells me it's imminent, and we still believe it to be imminent. So hopefully we should be able to move into a much more proactive marketing phase. We have issued for expressions of interest in relation to the land where we hope to have a service centre, and there has been marketing of other pieces of land by those who have expressed interest in doing so. But our reluctance into going into a full bottle marketing program of the land is anchored by the uncertainty around the grant. Do you want to add to that?
Through you, Dr. Madam CEO. I think that is, you've covered it entirely. I don't, the reputational risk counsellor, for us to go out and signage on the highway without actually having the ability to service the land and actually sell the land, I think would be, something we need to consider. So I think that's something the individual who's put up signs on the highway himself would have to consider as well. I'm not aware of that he has either an approval or has even put in a DA for those signage either. So I think we might need to take a step back a little bit and get the funding for the servicing. I think everybody's quite interested and quite keen to get that underway. There's a lot of work. I understand Greg Lawrence has been moving on getting the signage prepared and ready to go. So rest assured, if once that funding is available, we'll be moving out full bore. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
My other question was with regards to preparing a expression of interest for the land to be marketed by a local real estate agent and a Sydney real estate agent once the funding has come through, because we're not experts at marketing and selling land, and if the funding comes through, we're going to need a local agent and a national agent to draw investment to the region.
Councillor, I would just say, yes, we agree.
Any other discussion, Councillor Connor?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to say that the part of Councillor Tiley's question that didn't get a direct response was the issue of consultation or inclusion of councillors in achieving a better budget outcome, a better operating outcome. I think I would just like to say we're in as far as I can observe, we're in a very delicate situation at the moment. We're a new council, but we're not that new. We're 14 months old in terms of the elected body, and so far we've had no training in relation to this area. So it's very difficult for councillors to read these reports, with great understanding. And my plea is that staff might, in fact, consider, if they're going to deny the expenditure in the interest of saving money, that they in fact engage with councillors to involve them in this process, because it's a little disturbing when you hear that this has been cut, that's been moved, and of course I think we're all absolutely in support of that fiscal discipline. However, understanding the process and being more engaged in it, I think, would be helpful for all the elected members present here.
Thank you, Councillor O'Connor. I think in consultation with the Mayor, we had planned to provide some specific financial management training to the councillors in 2019, earlier in the new year. The offer to all councillors to meet with the Chief Financial Officer for either clarification, explanation or questions has always been there, and you are welcome to do that. But I understood that the previous budget was adopted. It was my responsibility to implement it. There has been a review of the budget, which was adopted by Council at its last meeting? Might have been the November meeting. But I'm happy to talk to you and to provide advice on the areas in which we have made reductions in expenditure. But there isn't a single area. There has been, I guess, quite a lot of discipline across all the budget items.
Councillor Tiley.
Mr. Mayor, a couple of sum-up sentences. Thank you, Councillor Bailey, for allowing this really important discussion to happen. I appeal to the staff remove the for information and put for decision on this report item every month, so that we can ask these questions, because there's nothing more important than our financial health. Thank you.
Okay, can I have a move or a second? We go back at Councillor Tiley, Councillor Martin. All those in favour? Okay, resume standing orders. The motion has been moved and seconded. No, it hasn't. Councillor Tiley, Councillor Gray.
He says we haven't.
So, do we need to? We've moved second. I'll get a vote on that then. All those in favour? Carried. So 16.1, I believe, is the this is the Environmental Sustainability Advisory Committee minutes. So can I have and there's for 3 parts. Can I have a mover and a seconder for that, please? Councillor Gray. Councillor Murray. Councillor Gray.
No comment just now, but I'll...
Councillor Morat. Speaker for. Councillor Tiley, you speaking for?
Neither, Mr Mayor, but some information for Council. I spoke at Tinga about the need for more work to be done on the green print, and yesterday I met with a university guy who's meeting with Ambrose Hallman and our staff on Friday to help us with the green print. The university's got a grant for creating a carbon neutral footprint in our regional council area, and they want to help us. So that's all moving along nicely. Thank you.
No, that's good, Councillor Tiley.
Can I also say in this section, excuse me, I also say in this section, I think we've also got to find a way to investigate how we can use our grey water. I think it's an absolute waste that we can't use it and can't sell it. And I think if we can persuade the university to look at doing something to help us, I know businesses that would buy the grey water, and other states are far more flexible than New South Wales. We've got to find, you know, with such water shortages, we can't just, excuse the English, send it down the creek. I know here we use it for our lucerne, but Guyra doesn't. So
Councillor Barley, this is not part of the...
Thank you for being flexible, Mr Mayor.
So, speak for the motion? Against? I'll put the motion as is. Those in favour? Carried. Item 16.4.
Can I move that with...
Sorry, just a minute, Councillor. The audit and risk minutes. So, mover is Councillor O'Connor.
Yeah, I would like to move it with an amendment.
Can I get a seconder, please, first? Councillor Morat. Councillor O'Connor.
The amendment is that at paragraph B, where it says that the following recommendations not be adopted, the not be deleted, and that in fact both of them be adopted, both A and B be adopted. I have reasons for that, and I'll explain them, which is that this negativing in paragraph B does not reflect the views of the committee. I believe it reflects the views of the author of this report. Be that as it may, I mean, the committee actually had a very significant meeting where it expresses in these paragraphs, sub-paragraphs of B, its concerns. And I think it would be, council needs to know that those concerns are there, and that the Audit and Risk Committee really does want to have them noted by council and explained. And in fact, there was a recommendation there in particular that the whole committee meet with the CEO and talk about the progress of that committee. And just a little bit of background for other councillors. This Audit and Risk Committee is one of the is a statutory, or will be a statutory committee that has been set up as part of local government reform to ensure that all local governments in New South Wales you know, have a functioning internal and external audit to look at things like protection against corruption, against fraud, safety issues. It's to do with all manner of risk, and when this committee expresses concern, I think we should support that committee, not just dismiss their recommendations. I'd be very happy if this report included some reasoning as to why paragraph B, the recommendation from the staff member is to not adopt those, but those recommendations of the Audit and Risk Committee, which is an external committee. I sit there basically as an observer, but I think we'd be quite remiss to simply dismiss their concerns, as seems to be the intent of the negative, which I'm seeking to have removed from paragraph B, paragraph B.
Yeah. Through you, CEO, could I ask Peter Wilson to clarify, please? Councillor Tyler, your mic.
Yep. When I read this, alarm bells went off. And I thought, if the Office of Local Government saw Part B, they'd be down on us like a ton of bricks. What in the devil is going on? I'm wondering whether the Chair has in fact met with the CEO yet. I'm particularly concerned about Parts 2, 3 and 5. And I think the Audit and Risk Committee, which I was involved in establishing on the Local Government Acts Task Force, has a vital role to play. And if we're not in lockstep with that Audit and Risk Committee, there's got to be good reason. So I want to know more about it, please.
CEO?
Thank you, Councillor Tari. I was concerned to see these appear in the minutes of the Audit and Risk Committee as well. My biggest concern was that I had, as the CEO, there'd been no approach to me or any discussion with either the Chair, by either the Chair or any other member of the committee with me as to things like why was the internal auditor position vacant since January 2018. I mean, there's a clear reason for that, but if the committee hadn't sought my input or advice around these matters, especially, you know, as I said, over a number of those things that I could have explained or resolved fairly quickly before the matter was entered into their minutes to come to Council for adoption. And I suspect that the recommendation has been read that way so that I could have a meeting with the Chair of the committee and there could be a more comprehensive response to those items contained in B. I have offered to meet with the Chair of the committee. I haven't had a response from her.
Dr. Mayor, I'm unsure whether you needed a seconder for the amendment, and if so, I would like to put my hand up to second that amendment.
Look, I think the outcome that we want is that that meeting occurs. As one of the councillor members, I'm very happy to approach the chair of the committee, and there may be some just communication problem, but I certainly can only say that I understand she is very keen to communicate, and if we can just pass this and move on and get on with having that meeting, I think you know, we don't need to labour the point now. I've got a seconder for the amendment, and I'd like to move on.
So we have an amendment to remove the word "not." Just to be clear. Yeah. So. Did you? All right. Motion. Okay, thank you. So, Speaker, where are we up to? 4? Councillor Gray?
In addition to what fellow councillor O'Connor has said, one of the matters of concern is that in the operational report on page 64, under the audit and risk, L3 4.1 and L3 4.2, particularly L3 4.2, it's marked as a red around the internal audit. So, as we know, risk is a serious concern for any local government, any local council, and during periods of change is the height of that risk. And we have certainly had our fair share of change over the past couple of years in particular, and therefore I would say that this is an important issue that does need to be addressed ASAP, and that meeting with the chair be a priority for the CEO. And that maybe the next time when we see the operational report, maybe it's an orange in this area rather than a red.
Okay, speaker against? All right, I'll put that then. Those in favour? Those against? The motion's carried. 16.5, which is the minutes of the Sports Council Advisory Committee, again in 3 parts. Can I have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Gray. Can I just get a seconder so that then Councillor Gillespie. Councillor Gray.
That the word in part C, the word not,
Can I just interrupt? I jumped ahead. There is a word amendment that we wish to put, which is remove the word not and adopted, and after the B it becomes noted. So be as in the yellow. So sorry, Councillor Gray.
Okay, so speaking, are you okay with that? As a seconder? No.
No. We go back to the original book.
We need it to, that the following recommendation from the Sports Council Advisory Committee meeting be adopted, and the rest stay the same.
I might just ask our CEO just to clarify before we go. Thank you, Councillor Gray.
Thank you, Dr. Mayor. I need to apologise. I think the combination of some clumsy wording and misinterpretation by the staff has placed us in this position. It was never the intention, and nor is it the intention, to remove the funding of $65,000 from the Sports Council. What was said, and is true of every budget process, is that consideration of that goes into the budget process for next year, where we can then, it's not available, another $65,000 isn't available this year, but it is considered and part and parcel of the budget process for 1920. So the council wishes, and I'm assuming that this is the indication that we've been given, it gives the council the opportunity to each year replace that in the budget as a matter of consideration. So it's not about removing the $65,000, it is the annual consideration of it. And if there has been an ongoing commitment to the council, a sports council, of a $65,000 fund, for a period of time, then the council has the opportunity to do that as part of the budget considerations. One of the things I was keen to do, in fact we are keen to do, is that there is a formal thinking through of where expenditure happens in every financial year, and that the council can consider where it wishes to place its resources.
Councillor, before you start, Councillor Tyler, this is a question.
Yes, question. Question to the CEO, statement and question. That's very refreshing to hear, because we as a council were spooked by an email which went out yesterday, which stated that you said that the Sports Development Fund will not be receiving 65,000. That's what spooked us. So it's very reassuring what you've said. Thank you.
I guess I apologise for that email.
Councillor Gray.
This, to be adopted, the part 2, the Sports Council Executive request Council's ongoing commitment of the 65 towards the Sports Development Fund continue in future years. I think this is important, that whether it is a time frame, but that needs to be included there. But we actually do need some certainty of funding for this Sports Council. This Sports Council has brought in well and truly over $14 million just in this year alone. That's a huge return on investment for 65,000. It's vital to the upkeep of our grassroots facilities that our children and our communities use weekend through the week in, week out. And it has to be a priority for this council to be looking after our future generations in sport. I do understand that it may need to be considered from year to year in the budgeting. I do think that we need a better assurance than that for the sport in our region. The necessity of facilities is the necessity of the maintenance of facilities needs to be guaranteed for our future generations in the short term as well as in the long term. And this Sports Council has been doing this for over a decade now, and they are doing it with huge amounts of success. So I recommend that we continue this funding for future years.
Councillor Gladley. Councillor Tyler, your mic, please.
I was going to speak. I was lined up.
No. Councillor Gladley.
Yeah, look, the warning bells went. They all I'm going to say, if it isn't broken, you don't have to fix it, and I think that's pretty well what. That's it. And yeah, no, I think it's a very essential part of it. And as I said, if it ain't broken, don't fix it.
Speaker for, I presume Councillor Tyler, you are speaking for?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, thank you. I'll be trying to be brief. This decision, Councillor Bailey, was taken early on in my term as administrator. It entailed bringing the Sports Council together, and the primary purpose was to remove the council from the day-to-day argy-bargy of giving 5,000 here, 5,000 there for whatever sporting type purpose. And that's worked very well. It's a model based upon what I did in the Clarence 15 years ago. It totally removes council from having to have debates around the table about who gets what. That's the best thing. The second thing it does, the sporting bodies have got to be members of the Sports Council to get any divvy out of the 65,000. That brings the sporting bodies together and they work more collaboratively, and that's been the case for some time. So the initial resolution wasn't 65,000, by the way. It was 65,000 plus CPI per annum. But I'm not going to argue about the CPI. Keeping the 65 is probably good enough. But I think if we don't do this today, all hell will break loose, quite frankly. And I'm saying that because there's no one else in the room. Thank you.
Speaker against? Okay. If there's no speaker against, I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Those against? Motion carried. Item 16.6, the Traffic Advisory Committee minutes. Can I have a mover? Councillor Martin, Councillor Murat, Councillor Martin. Councillor Murat. Anyone who wishes to speak for or against? I'll put that motion. Those in favour? Carried. And the last one is 16.7, the minutes of the Arts, Culture and Heritage Advisory Committee. So can I have a mover, please? Councillor O'Connor, Councillor Murat, Councillor O'Connor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I'm the chair of this committee, but similar amendment, a slight amendment to paragraph B, which I think is satisfied by just deleting the words "not be endorsed" and not be endorsed and, so that the following recommendations that council note, so delete the following recommendations, not be endorsed and that. All of those can come out. It will read that council note the committee's position. I might just offer a bit of an explanation in relation to those last two items, Roman points little 1, little 2 under B. The committee's been informed that the McLeod Demaric Proprietary Limited wish to put a rather pretty sort of garden-esque type sculptural installation in their new subdivision on Cooks Hill. The very knowledgeable arty people on that committee have looked at it and said it's lovely. McLeod's intend to pay for it, but there is a question around the ongoing maintenance of it once the developers, the development's sold and McLeod's are no longer around. So I think that's a matter of, I'm comfortable that just be noted, that it might be a matter for further consideration down the track. With respect to item 2, we're pretty much all aware of the recent narrow escape the courthouse had from a very sort from being an auction sale, and I'd just like the rest of council to know that the committee is talking now, actively seeking information and advice about ideas for how that building might be used if the dream of it actually being gifted in some way to the Armidale community occurs. So just so that you know, we're not pressing anything in that respect, but we're certainly talking with people who have some really exciting ideas about what that heritage building could be to the community in future. Yeah, with that with that amendment, I'm really happy to propose that motion.
Councillor Moran. A speaker for? Councillor Tyler, I presume.
Yeah, if I have to, I'll say I'm speaking for. I met with a group of people this morning who've got some brilliant ideas about the courthouse, and over the last few months I've had a lot of people talk about it. I'm sure they've done that to you. At some point, once we secure the building, we obviously need to pull those ideas together, and we will, and be consultative. The question I raise is in relation to these, several of these committee reports to us. We see, we accept these and this not be endorsed, and below it, there's no reasons. We're blind. We don't know what the reason, and it's clearly some member of staff or CEO, somebody who said don't endorse that. It would be very helpful for us to have just a few dot points as to why the staff view is that that shouldn't be endorsed, and I hope that can happen from now on. Thank you.
Speaker, Councillor Bailey. You're speaking.
I'm speaking in a question. Could I ask the CEO what the anticipated cost will be, or have any estimates been done to bring the courthouse up to a occupiable space?
The answer is no, we haven't done that necessarily, because some work was, I believe, done some time ago when the courthouse was offered to the council for $1. What we did know was it was going to be a significant sum to modify it. Oh, sorry. Oh, I wonder why. I'm sorry. But I do believe another potential user has had some high-level costings done to convert it from a courthouse to a usable space for this potential user, and it's in the order of $4 to $5 million.
Mr. Mayor, could I then ask or request that the CEO be encouraged to begin the process of estimating what the costs might be?
Good point, Councillor Bailey, but the problem is we don't own it and we're not even sure. It's a bit preemptive to commit staff resources into something that we may not own into a long-term future. So I'm reluctant to support that. Councillor Tiley?
I agree with you, Mr Mayor. We first need to secure the building, and you've only suggested half of the issue. The other half is a business plan. How can we generate income? There's a whole lot more to it than just what's it going to cost, because the cost side of it can be offset in part at least by heritage grants. Okay, so there's a lot of work to be done in that space, but we've first got to secure the building.
And the other point is, the other point too, Mr Mayor, is I think there's an expectation that the community groups will be able to use it for nothing, which is a real problem.
Thank you, Councillor Bailey. But until the state government makes a decision, we're in limbo here. So let's remind ourselves of that. Where are we up to? Any other speak against the motion?
Can I just have a quick question here too? Would it be too much to ask? I was lucky enough to have a tour through it last week while the agent still had it, and to be honest, that sounds like a hell of a lot of money that they've put to get that tour workable thing. I thought it was in pretty good nick. But would it be any way that we could actually get us councillors to actually have a walk through there so that we can have a bit of everyone can get a little bit of an engine going so that we can have a little bit of think about something if it ends up in our hands, that is?
Right. Anyone just speak against the motion? Okay, I'll put that then. Those in favour? Motion carried. Thank you. Now, since there's no one from outside present, we can move straight into